The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am your host, Shane Kelly, and I am joined by my fabulous co-host,
Laura Nash. How are you doing, Shane?
I am great. I had a beautiful morning. I just ate a pile of piping hot pancakes, and I have retreated to my attic lair where I record our illustrious podcast. And I'm actually pretty excited to talk about this game today because of its lineage and history and because it's such a weird departure.
Yeah, so this week we're talking about Reigns Beyond, which is the latest in the Reigns series. I believe we've covered every one of these except probably the Game of Thrones one, which I played a lot of because I'm the only Game of Thrones weirdo on the podcast. But so Reigns, if you haven't played the series, is that game that you swipe left or right to make decisions. It's the Tinder, the video game, as people call it. It has a lot of DNA with interactive fiction, which we all know and love here. But the idea is that you get these cards and you swipe to different sides to make a decision, and then that affects different resources, different things. And so far, every Reigns has been medieval themed. The first one was you're a king, the second one was you're a queen, and the third one is your various Game of Thrones characters trying to keep the throne. This one takes it to space.
This is so weird. I did not know what to expect here. Reigns Beyond, I mean, obviously from the title, it sounds like we're trying something new. We're going beyond, but I had no expectations of this. I had seen no advertising or marketing for it. So when I launched it and suddenly I was in a spaceship in Reigns, I was somewhat surprised.
Yeah, this one is a bit of a... It's funny to call any Reigns game a surprise release because they are... arguably some of the most well-marketed games. We're in an era where mobile games don't get necessarily coverage in main game outlet sites, but Reigns always did. Like every version of Reigns always got on Polygon, Verge, everything. This one is an Apple Arcade exclusive, and it came out on November 6th. And I don't think we would have covered it had I not been like, hey guys, we got to cover the new Reigns game. It is not only a tradition, but it's also kind of a really interesting sequel. Reigns is by Devolver Digital, the publisher, and Nerial's the developer, both of which are really good at like hyping their games. So to have Reigns Beyond be a silent release in a way, despite being like a really weird evolution of the game, seemed odd to me.
So the Reigns franchise, as you were saying, we've played a lot of these. I was really excited for the first one because it felt really mobile native and innovative when it came out around 2016. But the original Reigns game, like it had this kind of unique interactive model, and it was a kind of a weird but really effective way to bring interactive fiction to mobile, which hasn't been done that well that many times. And there's a lot of space to kind of experiment there, especially with making it into something that's very pick up and play and lightweight like this. Reigns Her Majesty, I thought really was a big step forward because it had a lot more to the story and a lot more just kinds of, the choices felt a lot more meaningful. If there's one kind of criticism that I threw at the original Reigns game, it's that first off, there's a absolute boatload of repetition in the original Reigns. It's somewhat to be expected because, you know, you reign over your country and then eventually your levels of your various meters get out of balance. And if any of them falls to zero, you die and start again as a little baby prince or princess.
Mm-hmm.
I think was it in Reigns where was it just a prince? You were just the king?
You were just the king.
Which is the thing that they switched up for the sequel, Reigns Her Majesty, of course. So
yeah, and the first game apparently had 800 of those little cards, and Reigns Her Majesty ended up with 1,300. So, and this game has 1,400. So it's not bigger than Reigns Her Majesty, this game. It's a little bigger, but like the things that I think they figured out, as you play, you will periodically get a bunch of new cards added to your deck. Like you'll get a new character or something and a bunch of cards will fly in. So I think that's what they fixed in Her Majesty, is they like added those kind of shuffled in new decks. So whenever you unlocked a new character, like a magician, suddenly you got 20 magician cards added that you didn't have before. That makes your it's funny to think of this as a deck building game because everyone calls it a decision making game, but I always think of something like Dominion, where once you get a card, you can get a bunch of other associated cards. Like really you're playing Reigns to get to the next milestone, to get to the next person, to get to the next, in this game, guitar, and then a bunch of stuff comes in.
I mean, you're playing it because it just genuinely is fun to make these like quick split second yes or no decisions and then see the wacky results of it. And with Reigns, the original, they were really playing around with this idea of living for a really long time and having the length of your reign be kind of a high score. And they kind of persisted through the others. And it kind of feels like that's been put by the wayside with this new game.
Yeah.
It's a big shift in how the game handles progression. You're not just adding to the possibility space by growing the deck. There are a lot more things that much more obviously persist from one playthrough to the next.
Yeah, that is, other than the theming, I think that is the hidden big change here, is really that instead of in previous versions where you die and all of your progression is lost, you start off from day one. There might be, a little bit of carryover. If you were a particularly bad king, maybe they say like the peasants are so happy to have a new king that isn't a dictator, but that's about it. You might get like a tiny stat boost at the beginning. In this game, your items persist and you are a clone. So you literally are still on your same ship. You have the same passengers. You are still in the same band. You keep all your guitars. We haven't really talked about this, but the whole premise is that at the beginning of the game, you get woken up by this howl from 2001 type sentient thing, and you pick up a band. And the idea is that you're going to, you don't know anything about the ship you're on. You don't know anything really about where you are, but you are the captain and you have a band, and you and your band are going to go from place to place in space and do something. You're not clear.
Yeah. So
the fact that you keep everything you pick up between rounds, including your money, means that you can make risky decisions in this one. And if you die, there's very little consequence. You just go back to the previous planet. It's completely different from the other ones in my mind.
It is. You almost couldn't have two more different premises from being like a reincarnating queen to being like David Bowie's Starman.
Yeah.
So it's pretty out there. It does kind of work. I mean, and there's a lot of like sci-fi homages going on here. It's really just a soup of different like sci-fi pastiche kind of mishmash of like different ideas. So one of the things I quite liked is like when you are flying the ship and doing just sort of general like space flight kind of stuff, everyone changes into their Star Trek looking outfits. But when you are getting ready to have band practice or do a show, everyone changes into their like David Bowie lightning bolt outfits.
It's one of my favorite things is you can always look at your ship before you take off from a planet. And when you're in the if you ask questions about navigation or the demographics or, are there pirates in this space? Everyone is in their uniforms. And if you click the button that says band, everyone like quick changes into their outfits to talk about the band. It's all the same people. But it's one of the things that made me laugh every time.
Absolutely. The other thing that kind of keys off of that is that the gameplay is very modal in a way that no Reigns game previously was, because and what I mean by modal is there's two or maybe three very distinct, maybe four distinct different ways of interacting with the game. Like one is your typical Reigns scenario, and that's the swipe left and right to kind of make key decisions that will keep you alive. And in this, that mode is basically when you're flying from planet to planet, and you're going to be interacting with your crew. You're going to be interacting with your passengers. Sometimes you'll be interacting with other spaceships in where you get into space battles. And those do have that kind of classic Reigns repetition to them. Like if you get into a space battle, you'll start to realize like, well, what's the right answer if they're right behind me shooting laser guns at me or whatever? Like, do I evade or do I turn? And you do kind of start to figure out, okay, well, there's a good result from this, right? And it's all, once again, about managing the different meters, which this time, instead of being things like your church likes you, the people like you, the coffers are full, etc., it's things like shields, energy system, oxygen recyclers, things like that.
And health of the crew, yeah.
So that's one thing. But now there's also this like land on a planet circumstance where you go down to the planet's surface, and then you have like between 1 and 4 different like on-planet activities, one of which is like check out your ship, one of which is go to a store and buy things, one of which is go to a bar, and the last is play a show. And not all of these are available at every planet. And I'll get into each one of those, which each really has its own kind of interaction mode. But then the fourth way of interacting with the game is also like star navigation, where you get to like swipe to choose a path through the stars.
And this is actually a pretty hidden one to me, because I at the beginning, when you choose your path, I thought that you kind of were choosing one to be on for the whole lifetime. So I didn't realize that every time you take off from a planet, you can spin your screen and choose different directions. It took me probably 3 deaths before I realized that. But you really can decide where to go if you want to. It's a lot more control over your future than I've seen in any other Reigns game. There's also, I would say, a hidden 5th one, but it's a throwback to the previous, to maybe the Queen's game. When you're inspecting your ship before you take off, you can choose navigation and you can wander around your ship in a maze. And that's something they did in Reigns, Her Majesty, but you could only get there by like inducing a weird dream state. And it almost always ended in you dying if you didn't get the right result. So I'm glad they stuck this like wandering through the corridors thing. I did, I think, get the right answer in that eventually. But there's no bad outcome.
Yeah, I did that a few times and didn't get anything fruitful out of it. So maybe if we do a spoiler break, you can tell me what happened.
Yeah, we should do the spoiler break for that.
Let's say there's one more thing, one more totally unexpected and unique interaction that they've added to this game, which is playing shows, and which adds this totally new interaction method to a game that's always just about yes or no, left or right, A or B. Now, when you play a show, it goes into what amounts to kind of a rhythm game where you have a flying guitar that's going through a trippy 3D tunnel and collecting hearts. You're still like sliding left and right on the screen. But now you're like controlling this guitar, kind of trying to collect these hearts while it kind of plays this like little rhythm game for you.
It's odd because it's not, I can't give a clear analogy to another rhythm game. It's not like Guitar Hero or Tap Tap Revenge where you're tapping on the screen. And this one, you keep your hand down and you are trying to fly into different hearts. And there's a track for most of the game, and sometimes there's not a track. And almost always you're collecting hearts, but sometimes there are also bad things you're trying to avoid. It's a very... I do actually really like the songs, which I think is what this game would live or die on. But every time you get a new guitar, you get a new song. It does mean that early in the game, before you have many guitars, you're going to be replaying the same 2 tracks quite a lot.
Yeah, that's true. And it's fun. It's not like, I didn't find it terribly hard, certainly with the levels that I managed to get to. But it is just nice to like have that as in a story that's about playing music, you know, to have this way to actually like experience that and live it out. It's a story about being a rock band and being on the road doing shows. So and then that adds this whole collectible aspect. There's always been like collectibles in this game, and in fact, a lot of the progression in Reigns has always revolved around collecting various either items or states, basically, which kind of form achievements. But now collecting guitars, it's a new kind of collectible. They're like a usable collectible because you often get to choose what guitar you're playing / song you're playing when you're doing a show and things like that. So I like that. I think that's neat.
Yeah, they also imply that you artistically can choose what song is appropriate to the planet when you have more guitars, and they'll give you a ton more money because you're playing the right music for them.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that. That's cool.
So something else about these concerts that I think is really fun is that it gets you money and you're on a planet where you can spend it. You've got a manager. Like all the things around the band I thought were really fun. I did not necessarily I want to fire Anton, who's like the worst guy on your ship. You realize after a while he might actually have problems, but he also like sniffs pure oxygen and like really is just this. He's the drummer though, so I kind of was like, of course the drummer is your worst crew member. Like it adds this layer to the Star Trek scenario that I think makes a lot more sense, because I think it would be not enough with either half. I feel like if it was just a band simulator, like it probably would have to go in like a weird Coke fueled dream thing that this game has no interest in. And if it were just a Star Trek simulation, like I don't think they wanted to do hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
I think blending the two together makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if it were just one or the other, it would be kind of something where you would feel like you know what to expect out of it. But the fact that it's such a weird mishmash means that like, weird stuff is going to happen and you're just going to roll with it, which is very Reigns, like the fact that, a bear shows up in the cargo container and like busts out and basically becomes your friend, part of the crew, constantly obsessed with honey, dressed up like Chewbacca. I thought that was pretty good. There's a lot of weird little things like that. I think at one point a weird barnacle thing like attached to my hull.
Strombo, the scholarly mollusk.
Yes. And he turned out to be like great at fixing the ship. And, so there's a lot of fun little story nuggets in there, which is the other thing about Reigns. Reigns has always twinkled as a little drip feed of fun story moments. And, it's always been great because it can be so surprising. And so making a complete genre shift is a great way to refresh some of that surprise. And I think they've done a good job with that here. So, I was really a little concerned the first time I realized that cloning didn't reset anything. I was worried that that addictive loop of Reigns was like, how long can I last? And I was worried that the surprise wouldn't keep going if you didn't reset. But I think actually the way this game works, because so much of it is you get to the next milestone, you get to the next planet, you do the next thing, and you unlock a lot more, that they kind of have to keep your progress because that's the surprise, is the next milestone in this version. It's more like, I think Shane said to Nate, like, this feels kind of FTL-ish in a way. Yeah, it has a little bit of that. I mean, it's obviously not a... maybe you could consider it a roguelike. People are defining that term just with increasing broadness these days. But it does incorporate runs and somewhat restarts. It's not really a roguelike. What it is... So what is good about it in terms of like comparing it to FTL, and why I guess I would make that comparison beyond the kind of science fiction of it, is it's kind of about overcoming obstacles by like remembering the right thing to do and collecting the right things. I guess you could apply that description to a lot of things. What it really reminds me of, as a lot of things have been lately, is I keep going back to this article that Emily Short wrote in like 2015 or 2016 that was let me find it really quick here.
Sure.
The article was called Beyond Branching, Quality-Based, Salience-Based, and Waypoint Narrative Structures. So the question for games is like, you have a game like this that is made out of lots of different little pieces of content, right? And in this case, they're little decks of cards. Basically, there's like a little card deck metaphor behind the scenes. And so how do you decide what pieces of the story to give to your players next? And in your like traditional choose your own adventure structure, you have like a tree that they're basically branching through.
Mm-hmm.
So a quality-based narrative, as it was defined here, actually is a term that was coined by Fail Better Games, who worked on Fallen London, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Fail Better? Yeah.
That's Fail Better.
Which makes a lot of sense comparing it to Fallen London, because Fallen London is very much a quality-based. And in quality-based narratives, they are the storylets or little storylines are unlocked by having different qualities. And those qualities, I mean, Fallen London a lot better than I do, but there's some things that is an attribute of your character, like you are dangerous, and you have a certain level of dangerous, I guess, is the way they handle it.
Yes.
And sometimes those qualities are things like, do you have this thing, like I guess like a flask of laudanum or whatever.
Yes. It's all Fallen London is a really complex system where you have personal attributes you can grow over time. You can have pets. You can have home comforts. You can have clubs you're part of. There's a million different parts of your character you grow, and that's how you unlock different things you can do. So currently, for an example, I'm trying to build a railroad to hell. And I am on pause for a little bit because I need to have perfumed gunpowder to create more tracks. So that's not necessarily an attribute, but I'm now shadowy enough to do the crime to get the gunpowder. So it's a really intricate system here. In this game, it's a little bit different, though. It's like you meet a character and you make the right decision, and that unlocks a point. Like there's little gates in this game.
There are elements, I think, in a lot of games like Reigns, there's going to be some elements of those quality based narratives. I think the way they're handling that is mainly things like the collectibles and the passengers and things like that. There are little storylets that you're only going to unlock based on that. And one of the great things that Reigns does is it really telegraphs when you have unlocked something like this. Like you pick up a passenger and you see cards visually being added to the deck to let you know, like there is new content that you are going to hit as you progress. So, and then on top of that, they also have, in fact, sometimes within each of those things, they have those little choose your own adventure style branching structures, which are kind of the little atom of a story that they're bringing out there.
One example that I found really interesting, in previous versions of Reigns, you would get these kind of choke points, especially in Reigns Her Majesty, where you needed to make a decision and it was kind of telegraphed in advance, like on year 500, you need to do something. And it felt like if you missed that, you never had a chance again. In this one, because of the cloning aspect, for example, there's a moment where the mollusk, like you can basically conduct a weird ritual with the mollusk. I'm trying to talk around spoilers. And I thought I chose wrong and messed that up. I died, and later, like 2 lives later, I got another chance because that kind of didn't happen because I died. So it seems more forgiving in these kind of narrative storylets than previous editions of the game. It's still going to make you wait a while before you get that decision again, but it seemed like these big decision moments weren't be all end all like they were in previous games.
The other term I remember that and I'm referencing back to the article just now, that Emily Short kind of coined in this article, which I think kind of applies more to, a lot of the reason I was looking this up was trying to remember this term, is salience-based narrative, which is a term that is where the narratives that it picks a bit of content out of a large pool, depending on which content element is judged to be most applicable at the moment. And so like quality-based narratives, that approach is agnostic to what kind of information matters. It can be pretty much anything. It can be like what pops to the top of the deck of cards. It could be what items you have. It could be what you've seen versus what you haven't seen. Anything that the system knows about like what is currently going on in the game world. And so I wonder if this would fall maybe more under that kind of a category of like that randomized element, or how they're they're probably not purely randomizing here. They're probably sorting things to the top based on some kind of criteria. So I think maybe it falls under that kind of heading.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with what you've done on this run. So I do think, like, for example, I would be shocked if there weren't decks for on the ship and decks for on the ground. Like, there's decks for talking to, different people you've talked to. Like, I think some of what you do before you go out might affect the deck. Like, if you look at your ship and you talk to different people, perhaps those conversations influence the next run and those people show up more. I feel like there's a lot of under the hood tweaking they've done. I know it's not purely random, but I will say, in credit to the game, I am not thinking about, I'm guessing at those systems because that's part of playing any deck building game, but I don't know for sure. And I know enough to know it's not random, and it feels fair, and it feels like I have some control, but I can't see the knobs. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the trick in these kind of games. Like, once I see the knobs and I know if I talk to this person in 3 rounds, then I'm going to get this card. It's fun in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I'm not thinking about the narrative. I think that mostly, when this game still feels fresh, I feel like I've had this conversation. I'm more likely to have this kind of conversation again. Feels good. I don't want to know I've had this conversation 7 cards later, I will trigger a space battle. Like, I don't want that level of control over a game, or I don't want to know about it.
The fact that you brought up, like, what you're talking about with the NPCs, that kind of brings up the third kind of way of building these narratives that Emily Short wrote about in the article, which is pretty much just around conversation, but she calls it waypoint narrative. And what she means there is that both the players and the NPCs in the game are able to kind of change the conversation topic, which I think is definitely true here. You can say you are making those yes or no changes, but probably even much more so, the game is having random conversations start at you by the various people on the ship at almost all the time. And then particular lines of dialogue are not associated with like the conversation topics themselves, but they're transitions from one topic to another. So the NPC has like a way of changing the subject, and like certain discussion points will change the subject to something else, and that is the way you kind of branch out and broaden out the overall like kind of conversation space in the game, which I think that kind of applies here too, because so much of Reigns is about having yes or no questions put to you by NPCs. Like, I would say that's probably the most common interaction in the game is NPC comes in and says something crazy, and I like take the little swiper and I swipe a little bit to the left and I see a dumb response, and I swipe a little to the right and I see a dumb response, and I just have to pick one.
Yeah, I think that, the obvious collectibles, and I think the progress meter in this game is the guitars. Like, the more guitars you get, I think that is your completion meter of the game. But I think, to me, the more interesting collectible in this has always been the characters. So you can see what deaths you've gotten, and you can see what characters you've unlocked. And this game says there are 60 different characters you can meet. And every time you meet them, like new stuff comes in your deck. You get new options. Those characters may be dangerous, but you can generally turn them to be your friends, a la Undertale. And I think, to me, I would make stupid decisions to try to befriend characters I shouldn't, by any stretch of the imagination, let on my ship. But I was like, oh, I should definitely open this crate because I might make friends with this bear. And it's that kind of dumb decisions that I really like making in this game. It's the kind of game where you will 20 times Anton will show up and will be like, I've been sniffing oxygen for the tank straight. And 20 times or 19 times you're going to say, Anton, you idiot, stop doing that. You're going to kill us all. And one time you're like, this run isn't going very well anyway. Let me join in. Because I want to know what happens.
Yeah.
But like 19 out of 20 times, you're going to be like, of course I'm not going to sniff pure oxygen from the tank. Like that's a bad thing to do. And after a few times, you're like, maybe I'll join him.
That you make a good point about, like, I think that like lends itself to the nicest thing about Reigns is in a lot of like choice-based interactive fiction, you're constantly left wondering what if. The fact that Reigns has such a large amount of repetition in it, and you're going to see these choices again in like probably at least half of these choices you're probably gonna see again. You will have the opportunity to scratch that curiosity itch and see what would have happened if I had turned left instead of right. So that's really nice. And I think this is the thing that doesn't make sense to me now the most about this game is like no one is reigning over anything. But
like why is it called like your captain? But they also were like, we might mutiny at any point. So yeah, the other thing that got me is that feels super different is maybe I just was better at the game, but like I think I capped it in previous Reigns games. If you get all the way to the bottom of a meter or all the way to the top, you die instantly. And in this game, it seemed like I got pretty close to the top on a couple things, and I didn't just immediately like crash the ship.
No.
So it feels more forgiving, and maybe there's not really a consequence for being at 100% like there were before.
Yeah.
But
I also don't think so. There's also, I think, a little bit of a cushion at the bottom of the meters when you get them all the way down, like the control panel starts to explode in classic science fiction spaceship design style. But you have like a little bit of time to pull it back, it feels like.
Yeah, it used to be like insta-death in Reigns. Like all previous versions of Reigns.
You're right. I also did not hit any deaths by having any of the meters overfilled. And that kind of makes sense. Like, I don't know what a death by having your oxygen recycler work too well looks like. It's probably not pleasant, but I don't know.
It felt very forgiving. It didn't feel like off-brand, but it definitely had a different feeling because I think the hardest part for me when I got good at Reigns was not triggering, the peasants throw you a party and everyone gets too drunk and you die getting stampeded.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of death that you get when you're good at Reigns. And I didn't trigger that here.
Here's the thing. In all the previous Reigns games, every decision has a small but meaningful impact on the meters. And so every decision has a little bit of precarity to it, right? The first time you make any decision, you don't know like exactly what direction it's going to push which of your meters, except you can kind of make a little bit of an assumption based on reading it. Like, should we give money to the church? You can assume the church is going to go up and money is going to go down. Here, there are a lot of different scenarios that you're in, and a lot of them are a lot less precarious, and the choices you're making are really not going to lead to a negative impact on any of your meters. In fact, the meters just vanish from the screen for sections of this game. So that's a big difference. And it's also just like your average, space flight while you're kind of cruising through space seems like it's a lot less likely to result in you dying. It really is concentrating that risk into these specific scenarios, like when you get into a space fight with another spaceship or something like that. And in those scenarios, like the risk goes way up, and the events repeat a lot more. Like you'll see the same, piloting maneuver discussions and things like that happening. And like, should we go to evasive maneuvering? And, there's an asteroid field over there. Should we go try to fly through it and try and shake them off? And you'll see those kinds of interactions seem like they repeat a whole lot more, because it's just sort of a concentrated scenario space, I guess. And that's pretty different. I will say my complaint about those is I died almost every time I died in one of those like space combat scenarios. And it was not as clear to me like what the risks and like benefits of the different choices were as it was in base Reigns, which means it was very obscure. Like in Reigns, those choices could be obscure. Here, like I would think, okay, I'm choosing the thing that means like dodging, so it probably means the spaceship's not going to shoot me here. Oh, they shoot me every time. So that was a little weird.
Yeah, you're like, dodge takes your power up, and I thought dodge was going to take it down. Like there's that kind of thing. And I think to me most of the deaths that happened were because of, it felt like RNG, like, but not in the way that like you just randomly die, more like someone called you and you didn't handle that call well. Like a lot of the extra events were how I died. Because you can generally not like, again, if you're not just sniffing pure oxygen and everyone dies of asphyxiation, like you can control that death. But, sometimes people will call you, and if you don't handle the call well, you will just immediately die. One time, I think there's a lot of things that sound very risky happening on your ship, and some of them are extremely risky and some are normal, and it is hard to tell the difference. I think that is arguably a good thing. But since you keep all your stuff and you just go back to the previous planet, it's not too bad. I think later in the game, I started taking longer trips and not stopping on planets as often. And I have a feeling the longer you go between planets, the more random stuff is going to happen. The more people hail you, the more pirates come up. So if you're feeling like the game is getting stale, like perhaps swing your navigation to a longer trip. Because those, from what I could see, like I had more interesting runs with more interesting encounters the longer I went between planets.
So let's wrap this up by considering some of our favorite moments, or maybe just favorite things from the game. And I can start us off. My favorite thing is a reference to one of my favorite games we have ever covered for this show. I found a paperclip in one of the stores, and
did you just buy everything every time?
Oh, just buy everything every time.
Which honestly, that's what you do.
I like that a lot in this game, because you have plenty of money to buy like, rice and paper clips and tungsten and gold and like piles of meat or whatever that happen to pop up in the store. Like why not just let me buy everything? Let me live my rock star dream.
Of course.
But there was one time where I found a $36 paper clip in the store, and the description on it says, "The remnants of an alien race which turned every piece of matter they encountered into paperclips," which is of course a reference to Universal Paperclips, one of my favorite pieces of one of my favorite games we've covered for this show. If you guys have not played that or learned about it, you could go check out our episode about it. You could just Google it. I don't know if it's the first thing that comes up on Google, because there's actually a brand of paperclips called Universal. But it is a great game, and it's I think a mind-blowing example of like the things that you can do with like something really stripped down, like the clicker genre. So Universal Paperclips, having a little Easter egg for that was really delightful.
Yes, and were you able to use that paperclip?
No, I wanted to. I can't wait to find the place to use the paperclip. How do you use the paperclip?
So skip ahead a minute if you really don't want any spoilers. But there's a moment where you get into like an almost an asteroid field of bent metal, and you can add your paperclip to the pile. Like, it's clearly, if you read between the lines, they're paperclips, and you can like offer your paperclip to it. And when you do so, like all of it like forms a crystalline structure that's like, thank you, and it like moves on. Like, it's a really great, like, it's as if you entered a sector where everything was turned into paperclips, and they're going to turn your ship into paperclips, and you can just I imagine just holding your little paperclip out, and they're like, and like suddenly everything resonates in harmony and then moves on. It felt very good. Every time I used an item correctly, it felt good. That's a hard thing to pull off. There is the randomness. You get scenarios where you're like, I don't know what to give him this. But using the paperclip was one of my favorite moments. I'll also say, like, I felt awesome when I unlocked the black market, and I won't tell you how to do it. But the first time I went into a black market and got to buy all the stuff there, I got really excited because it's clear that like there's some maybe crafting mechanics later on. Like, the way you get guitars here seems to be a lot of different ways. Some are just discovering Easter eggs. Some are just like moving in. But I think based on stuff I buy in the black market, I'm going to be able to craft a guitar. And I'm really excited to do that in the future.
Sweet.
Things I hated. Why is Elon Musk on my ship? I want Elon Musk off my ship. I do not want to be dealing with Elon Musk,
Vented.
but I somehow got him on my ship, and I'm very annoyed about it. And
Musk
I can't
is
find a way to kill him. Elon Musk.
Oh.
But he does say the waves of dysentery will flood the galaxy, and a new era of fragrant peace will ensue. And you can say, pretty sure you mean descent. The waves of dysentery.
Okay.
So I don't want. I was really like, it's so hard to get me on the side of the conglomerate in any of these games. I'm always pro Rebels. But once I found the head of the Rebels was basically Elon Musk, I have done a hard turn. Now I'm like, screw your rebellion. It's all about piracy now. How do I kill this guy? I have not figured out how to kill him yet. I want to boot him in the airlock.
I wish you
luck. And I can't. And that's all I want to do is murder my passenger. And I can't. Give me that card. Get him off my ship.
Well, Laura, since we have a little time remaining with the end of our episode here, we have a segment. Listeners, you know us. We love to talk about the things that are making us happy. And I certainly have something that's making me happy this week. Laura, do you have something making you happy this week?
I do. And it is something I have recommended in the past, but now it's easily accessible. So I am overjoyed that I am able to recommend Taskmaster, and people in the United States can actually watch it. So at some point in the last couple quarantine months, the Taskmaster YouTube channel has put almost all of the previous seasons on their YouTube channel.
Really?
Yes.
Laura recommended Pet Taskmaster to us before. By us, I mean my wife and I, and we have binged a lot of it. And
through means.
Yes.
But now you don't need means. You can just legally go on YouTube and watch it.
And you should.
And you really should. So Taskmaster is, so it's a British panel show. And what that means to people in the US who don't know what that sequence of words means is, there's a culture where comedians just go from show to show being funny in the UK, and there's some late game show element to it. Taskmaster actually front loads that. So the idea is everybody is given the same task, and it might be something as easy as, or somewhat straightforward as, make the best snowman, but it is July and you have 30 minutes and people have to figure out, what do you think a snowman is? What supplies do you need? Make something. It might be draw a horse while riding a horse. All kinds of weird things. It is extremely notable because in the US, we tend to put normal people on game shows. Normal people are a tenth as funny as comedians who think they're smart being extraordinarily stupid. And there's nothing better than a person whose job it is to be smart and witty, just seemingly unable to turn a cardboard box into anything, or like trying to run over a sculpture with a bulldozer. All kinds of outlandish stuff happens on the show. The comedians are great. You're going to end up with a bunch of new favorites from the British comedy scene, which you have no reason to know. But I sent one clip to a friend to sell her on it. And she was like, who is this weird ginger man? Why is everyone doing quick change outfits? She was like, I want to watch hours of this. Mm-hmm. You will be a convert very quick. Taskmaster on YouTube. I am so happy to actually recommend it on the show, because before you had to like go to weird Reddit sites to find it. And now you can just watch it for free legally.
Yes, finally a ethical way to watch the Taskmaster. And
wonderful.
Honestly, I gotta say,
it was briefly going to be on the CW, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, it really does walk a beautifully straight line between like just for laughs, making people do dumb stuff kind of tasks, and like actual challenge and like tricks. There's a little bit of a mix of all of that in the DNA of the show.
One of my favorite things about Taskmaster is that you have just as little time to think about how you would solve the problem as they do, because you hear the task, and generally they hear the task and immediately must begin it. Sometimes there is a planning stage, but it is a show that I often pause with my husband, and we're like, okay, quick, what is the first thing you do? Like, because it is all about instantaneous decisions, which is why I love it, because it's smart people who get panicked and make dumb decisions. And you love to be like, in this situation, I would know that you don't one example, get rid of this watermelon. You have 2 minutes and there's a watermelon on the table. Get rid of as much of this watermelon. And everyone is like, I will stuff it down my pants. You're like, what would you do? And you're like, I don't know, stuff it down my pants. I can't think of anything else. You hit play, true to form, 2 people do that immediately. It's that instant reward of like, your brain has to work as fast as they do if you want to, quote, play along. And people are weird. Like, I do UX research, and I always have to remember, like, people are going to surprise you. Every episode of Taskmaster, I'm surprised. So if you do professional research, maybe watch an episode of the show and realize you are really not the user, and people are strange.
Some of these I remember one of them that I was trying to think of was just very, very funny to watch. And it was having them make a bed to hotel standards while holding hands. So it was like 2 people trying to make a bed together, but they had to hold hands the whole time. That was funny. And the time ended when they would get into bed together.
It's smart stupid. Like, I love a smart stupid show where you get to like, it's a very intelligent show, but also you get all that like America's Funniest Home Videos type stuff where there's just nonsense happening on screen.
Absolutely.
It's pure id. Enjoy.
Yes, and it doesn't hurt that the people actually playing are truly hilarious and often very inventive in ways to cheat.
Oh, yeah. Cheating is a huge part of the game, but cheating that you will not get penalized for is the name of the game. How about you, Shane? I've now watched the Sonic about Taskmaster for 10 minutes.
So you wasted so much of our time, and now I don't know if I can get to both of my wonderful happy things.
Do both of them.
So I will start with a shout out to someone who has done something that really just made me feel so happy. Mark Bramhill is a friend of the show, and a personal friend and a podcast buddy. And he has a new show that started up not that long ago. I think he's had like about 5 or 6 episodes, and these are very short episodes, about 7 to 10 minutes, I believe. And the show is called Enthusiast. You can find it at enthusiastpodcast.com. And this is a show where Mark just interviews people about things that they love. So it is the ultimate making me happy podcast. And he talks to people about just things that they like. And he's done episodes on everything from astrology to fish sauce to apples. And now he has an episode in which he interviewed me. So the wonderful thing about this for me is, well, I have never been like interviewed by an actual interviewer, and then had my words edited in such a way that I came off as sounding intelligent, which I finally do. I finally get a window into what I would sound like if I spoke in complete sentences.
Thank you to Reagan, who routinely makes us sound smart on a
yes,
weekly basis.
Reagan does, but Mark has done an amazing job. Mark interviewed me about my love of Dungeons and Dragons, and he actually also interviewed Reagan about vintage electronics and vintage game hardware. So he managed to do a cute little twin brother double feature with the two of us, 2 episodes. And they make a really nice kind of back-to-back. I'll tell you something that to me was really great about this is, I've said it before, but listeners, there is a pandemic on. If you're hearing the news from me for the first time, please seek alternate sources of information about current events. But the pandemic has essentially shut down my Dungeons and Dragons playing. About 2 weeks ago, I started playing again, carefully with, sensible precautions, out of doors. And I'm returning to the game after about 7 months. And to be able to hear this recording of myself talking about why I love the game really recharged my motivation tank for this, and it makes me so happy to be able to get back to it. And so I want to say a big thank you to Mark. And for you listeners, Reagan and Mark and I have been talking about ways that we might share some of these episodes in our feed. So you may be watching out for that. At the very least, I think we'll get those out on our Discord, but you may hit the main feed or something here on the short game. So
yeah, and a hearty thumbs up to all of those episodes. I was not sure, because I have heard both Reagan and Shane talk about these topics. I was not sure what I was going to get when I listened to them, but they're both really delightful. Shane recaps beautifully one of our like notorious sessions from a while back, and it made me feel really good about that. But I thought when you brought up the pandemic, that you were going to go with like I miss meeting random people and hearing what they're into. I am not really an extrovert, but I love listening to people talk about what they're hype about and get a little glimpse into, like, I went to an outdoor party and had someone talk about like Viking historical novels for 20 minutes. And it was probably the best thing that's happened in weeks.
I do love that.
And this is what that is. And Mark takes hours and hours of conversation and boils them down to 7 minutes of that perfect happenstance meeting where you mention fish sauce to somebody and they're like, I am super into fish sauce. Here's 7 minutes about why you should care. And it feels great. It feels like that happenstance meeting that just doesn't happen right now. So those 2 episodes are wonderful. The whole feed is. So definitely, I don't want to step on you making what's making you happy, Shane, but I will say it also made me very happy.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's just a good, part of it is a great show because it's very clear that Mark knows some very interesting people. So
yes.
And I'm very happy to be counted among that number. I'll add one more thing that's making me happy this week because I like to throw in something from the world of games, and also because Reagan is not on the show. And usually when Reagan is not on the show, when Reagan is on the show, he will stop me from talking about Magic the Gathering too much. So I would like to celebrate the release of a new set that I'm super excited about called Commander Legends. My favorite way to play Magic is Commander. It's a multiplayer, very social format of the game where people play with big, insane decks full of crazy spells. And when people play Commander, they're playing like some of the biggest decks, the splashiest cards from throughout the entire history of the game. my other great love is of drafting, which is where you pass packs around and take cards as a group and then build decks and then play one against the other. So this is two great tastes that taste great together. This is the chocolate in my peanut butter of Magic the Gathering. Having draft, in which you actually draft and build a commander deck, is insanely good. And I will say this is actually probably, I mean, maybe not the very best. It's not designed for brand new players, but if you're even a little bit inclined towards Magic, this is a really fantastic set to check out. The cards are phenomenal. The format is insane. And I will just say that, so I got a chance to draft it with some friends. Once again, I am playing, in person, but out of doors, masked and with all sensible precautions in place, as I would encourage everyone to do. But if you have a safe way to do this, and I think it's also on Magic Online if you play that way, drafting and playing Magic with Commander Legends is totally phenomenal. I drafted a deck that was green-black elves, and this is a deck that it was a draft deck that could have hung with some of my most powerful commander decks that I've ever built. And some of the things that happened in these games were just absolutely insane. Just like
the emergent gameplay is choice. Wonderful.
It is truly choice. And this set has doubled the number of legendary creatures in Magic, which is absolutely insane. This is so full of like incredible legendary creatures that you could use as your commander for commander decks. And that's all I'll say, because I know Reagan is going to edit this down to me saying like 5 words in which I say, hey, Magic is good. But yeah, those of you who are out there and who are interested in Magic should definitely have an eye on Commander Legends. It only takes like 4 players to do a draft pod of it, and then you can turn right around and play a sweet 4-player game that's going to really be a different experience and a lot more social and fun. So totally recommend it.
Wonderful.
And that's it for us for this week. Thank you for joining me, Laura. This has been, as always, I find it interesting when I am doing the intro and outro, because I do it so rarely. Reagan is so dedicated and such an excellent podcaster that I almost never have this duty fall to me. But if I can remember how to do the outro, I think Reagan says something like this. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find us online at theshortgame.net, where you can find our back catalog of episodes, and you can search for games like Universal Paperclips. You can also find each of us on Twitter. The show is on Twitter at _shortgame, because someone stole our handle before we could get there. I am on Twitter at 8BitShane. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash. And if you play Fall in London, I'm just Laura Nash there, because I didn't know that was going to be a public name.
There you go.
Yeah, if you play, I am happy to be your friend. I am a person of some importance and can help you with social actions. So
yes, she is a person of some importance.
I am.
In Fallen London and in the real world.
Oh, thank you.
Other people of some great importance can be found on our Patreon. The people who support this show on the Patreon help make it possible. Those of you who are supporters there, many of whom are giving just $1 a month, the money that you send helps contribute greatly. For example, it has recently helped Laura to upgrade the audio quality from her audio setup, which I am told by Reagan has reduced his editing time by approximately 1 hour a week, reducing.
Which is astonishing, and I
yes.
feel
Why didn't
very
you say
bad
anything,
about
Reagan?
that.
We would have tried to fix the audio sooner. And you know, I think it's also worth mentioning that everyone who donates to our Patreon gets access to our Discord, which is where we plan episodes, where we discuss what's going on in our games. We have probably my favorite thing there is the Making Me Happy This Week channel, where good vibes only are brought to the table and shared and you should tell us what's making you happy. So, anything I'm missing?
Nope, that's it.
That's it. Well, thank you for listening to The Short Game, and have a short week.